Hello and welcome to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan, and we've wrapped up the first round of the NHL playoffs now. Exciting, I think so. I love the first round. It was a great first round for me. A couple of Game 7s, so we'll get to some things like that. We've got some awards that are some nominees coming up, and we'll go through our picks that we made through round one. So Matt, I guess I'll lead into you here. Round one recap. What were some of the things that you thought and some things that you liked out of the first round?
Yeah, the Game 7s, like you mentioned, we got 3 of them actually. We got we saw a couple of them last night: Toronto, Boston, Washington, and New York, and then we had Detroit and Anaheim a day ago. This is Tuesday, by the way. They were recording this, so if you see this on TV later, I mean, these guys don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, some exciting series. Some not so much.
Some disappointing ones, maybe.
Some a little bit disappointing. I mean, not disappointing in the fact of results, but disappointing in. I expected Montreal, Ottawa to be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah.
I didn't expect Ottawa to really walk all over Montreal the way that they did. San Jose rolling over Vancouver. That series was never really too competitive. I expected a little bit more. Some controversy maybe in Vancouver now. I think Luongo was supposed to be out the door. Now they've said for sure that he won't be back next year. So I think they've got some questions after being swept. Even 7-game series, the Washington and New York series was a good series, but that Game 7 really leaves a lot to be desired. When you see a team go and lose 5-0 on home ice, you always kind of, it's like watching a great movie and then the ending sucks, right? It leaves a sour taste in your mouth no matter how good the movie is. The end of it kind of ruins it for you. Say, you know what, you want to see a good Game 7. But speaking of good Game 7s, last night, unfortunately for my Maple Leafs, a little bit of a collapse, but way better series than I think anyone predicted. What do you think about that series?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it was a phenomenal series, like right up till the end. I mean, Boston went up 3-1 early on. I would say that Toronto actually dominated the early part of the series for sure, especially the first 4 games. Didn't get the result they wanted. Did go down 3-1. Won their 2 Game 5 and 6 and sent it to Game 7. And then, hey, look, Game 7. It's a one game for the series, and the Leafs are up 4-1 and kind of unlucky. I mean, I know it's disappointing. Yeah, I mean,
factor in that Boston, they've been there before. They've won cups. They're a team that's never going to give up, right? And the Leafs, at the very least, just speaking as far as a Leafs fan, I think it's a learning experience for a young team. You kind of need those little speed bumps to go over before you can kind of grow as a team. But you saw a lot out of them, so I think it was impressive.
Yeah, we both picked Boston to win the series, and I mean it was great
right
until the end.
6, so in 7 is a little bit more than what I expected.
Anymore, yeah, and the Leafs were right there all series. Some other surprises for me. I mean, maybe not so much for a surprise. I picked LA to beat St. Louis. Maybe a bit of a surprise early on. St. Louis went up 2-0, and we saw Quick's bad gaff where he just banked into the boards right out front of the net.
A little bit of a messy start.
That was in Game 1. That was an easy one, and then St. Louis did take care of home ice, going up 2-0, like I said, and then all of a sudden LA came out of nowhere and they started rolling over the Blues. 4 straight games, a couple of in overtime, a couple of 1-goal games. But other than that, I mean, they dominated the 4 games. A couple of shutouts in there as well.
St. Louis just can't seem to beat LA in the playoffs. They can't seem to get it done against them.
They couldn't do it. You mentioned the way San Jose just rolled over Vancouver. I thought that would be a little bit more competitive. I picked Vancouver to win it in 7 actually, and St. Louis just.
I had San Jose, but I had him in 6. I thought it would have been. I thought Vancouver, would have been at least been able to take care of a couple of games on home ice. Get it done. Maybe. I guess the goaltending controversy, again, could have been something you didn't know. Schneider was hurt to start. Luongo played very well in the first couple of games, kept them in the first couple of games. And then they went back with Schneider. He absolutely, made a mess of himself in the 3rd game and ended up getting pulled. And kind of surprising that Vigneault went back with Schneider in Game 4, not with the guy who arguably was the better goalie in the first 2 games. So I guess it was just kind of Vigneault's vote of confidence to say, Schneider's the guy going forward. So who knows what to see from them. Another team that was kind of impressive, didn't get a series done, same as a couple of other teams, but the Islanders, represented themselves pretty well as an 8 seed, came in against Pittsburgh, who's an overwhelming favorite, a far better team, but New York gave them all they could handle. They cost Fleury his job. They came in there, they lit him up on a couple of games, and they showed that they do have a high-powered offense. That they're going to be a team to be reckoned with in the next couple of years going forward too. Good young team.
Yeah, we'll see with Pittsburgh. Because, I mean, they play Ottawa tonight in Game 1, and they haven't said who's starting. But I actually hope Vaughn plays.
I believe Vaughn is starting tonight.
I don't see why not. I mean, they haven't specifically said, but I hope so. I mean, the way Fleury played terrible, realistically.
I think they're going back with Vaughn as far as I know, and that's a little bit surprised. That's 2 years in a row now that Fleury's been. Pretty shaky in the playoffs. Last year, he was almost single-handedly the reason that they lost to Philly. And then this year, if they don't have Vaughn back there, Vaughn wasn't with the team last year, I don't think. So they didn't have that option really to go to him, and they just had to keep sticking with Fleury and saying, okay, maybe he's going to figure it out. And this year, I think Biles kind of had enough and said, you know what, we're not going to let this get to a 6th or a 7th game. Sorry, we're going to put Vaughn in there and came in and won both of his games after the series got the series got the 2-2. Vogt came in there, got the shutout his first game, and then got the win in the game 6 as well.
Yeah, because I know it was Brent Johnson last year who backed him up, and he didn't obviously play a whole lot in the playoffs.
I don't think.
Another series that I really liked actually was the Detroit-Anaheim one. I didn't get to watch a whole lot of it, I'll be honest, but
late games for those West Coast ones,
yeah, it was late games, and I enjoyed it actually. I watched Game 7 there, and it was a great series. I quite enjoyed the way Detroit picked up towards the end. I mean, I don't want to say Anaheim choked or anything, but Anaheim, they were the 2 seed going in. They were, I think they were favored quite high, but we kind of said, I remember before the first round that Detroit was one of those 7 seeds that quite easily could knock anyone off. Nobody wants to play them, so now they'll move in and actually play Chicago in the second round. But that was one that I really liked. I liked the way that Detroit came in and handled it, especially in Game 7 there, and the way they handled a couple of their overtime games throughout the series. So I like to see that.
Yeah. Well, we had said I know we had talked about it before. Is Detroit's they're always one of those teams when their back's up against the wall and they absolutely need to win. They always seem to just find a way. They're just one of those teams, kind of similar to what Boston does when they need to find a way to win. They're going to do it, and you knew kind of in the back of your head when they was going to Detroit for Game 6, and Detroit had to get the win to force Game 7. You knew they were going to do it. They came out and did it, and then in Game 7, when it's anyone's game, toss up, and Detroit just came out. They're both experienced teams. I mean, Anaheim, you can't say that they're young. They got they have a pretty veteran core that's been with them for a few years now. They got guys like Solani, they got guys like Getzlaf, Perry, even Beauchemin there now. I think Anaheim's problem is kind of, I mean, you can't say that Detroit has the veteran defenseman, but without guys like Niedermeyer, who Anaheim's kind of leaned on in past years, I think that's what's kind of lacking. They look a little bit disorganized in their own end sometimes, and that's what kind of Detroit, I think, was able to pounce on. They have those, those quick young European guys up front, like Brunner, who was a menace all over them most of the series, and then I can't remember the name of the other guy who scored in the first OT game. But the young guys were kind of all over the defense. Yeah,
and in that series, actually on the flip side, I would say Bonino in Anaheim.
Bonino,
he played phenomenal. I mean, obviously they didn't get the series done, but he played phenomenal in their games. I really liked what he was doing. And as you mentioned, some of the defensive core, obviously Detroit, they're missing Lidstrom, who they haven't. I mean, obviously you'd love to have a Lidstrom. You never want to let a guy like that go. Kronwall, the big hitting Kronwall, and then I guess moving into maybe the other Western series now, Chicago and Minnesota. I watched a few of those games. I was pretty sure that Chicago would roll over Minnesota as they kind of did in 5 games. But to see some of the way Chicago did play in that one, I think that'll be a good series moving forward with Detroit and Chicago now.
Yeah, Chicago was kind of in and out, up and down early. They kind of found their game a little bit later. It seemed like in the first few games they kind of they struggled to score in the first game against Josh Harding, who was a surprise start.
Yeah.
With Backstrom getting hurt in the warm-up that game.
The warm-up of game 1,
Didn't see a single minute of action, and then they ended up having to roll between Josh Harding, who ended up getting hurt as well, and Darcy Kemper came in. So I mean, you got to feel for Minnesota. They're putting who's realistically a 4-string goalie to start the year, Kemper, because they traded Matt Hackett away to Buffalo, but and then they were kind of up against it going between their 2nd string and their 4th-string goalie. They were never really going to have much of a chance, but had a pretty good showing. They got a win on home ice in OT that one game. So Chicago didn't look unbeatable, just as Pittsburgh didn't really look unbeatable. They looked like I don't want to say right for the picking, but they are beatable. They have shown, each team took a loss. It's not like they came in and did what LA kind of did last year and just steamrolled over everybody and looked like there was going to be no one to stop them. So, I think it'll make for an interesting second round. That you can see those teams. They do have a little bit of vulnerability and they can be beaten.
Yeah, and I mean, as you mentioned, Minnesota. I mean, they showed up there for a bit. They had, they won 1 game. I mean, as you mentioned, they did end up down with their 4th-string goaltender on the depth chart to start the season, with them trading the one over to Buffalo and then the 2 getting injured. So it was kind of tough to see. I mean, we've got some awards coming up. Maybe we'll talk about those a little bit later.
Most of our candidates now.
Yeah, we got the candidates for some of the awards, so we'll go through those, and we'll go through our picks from last week, and as well as some new ones for round 2. We got round 2 starting tonight. Pretty excited actually. So we'll get all back into that. But you're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Hello and welcome back to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider, along with Matt Durnan, and as we mentioned previously, it's a pretty exciting time actually, moving into some of the playoffs, getting into the second round now, and we've also got some awards. Some of the nominees come up, so I believe they announce all the winners during the Stanley Cup Finals or something like that. So
they do the awards ceremony after, or are they going to do them
but I think
year?
Something like
that. The candidates have all been pretty much announced though now,
right? So maybe we'll jump into the first one, I guess, is the Hart Trophy. It's one of the most prestigious ones. It's kind of the high-end one.
The MVP, big one, right?
So maybe I'll throw that one at you first. We got Crosby, Ovi, and Tavares. I mean, all 3 guys were pretty impressive throughout the year. Ovi had a bad start, but he kind of jumped into things towards the end.
Yeah, I'm surprised a little bit about Tavares' selection. I mean, great year. It's hard to argue with. I feel like Stamkos and St. Louis might have got snubbed a little bit on that end. They were both, both great players. Crosby's also a little bit surprised me just for the fact that he missed so many games. I mean, he was valuable, but I feel like MVP is kind of value to your team, not most valuable in the league, and Pittsburgh kind of showed that they were able to pick it up and they got the job done without Crosby. They still won. They obviously want Crosby. He's a great player. He's arguably the best player in the league. So it's hard to argue with him. But Ovechkin, I think is right now would be my favorite because what he did. He picked it up and he played at such an incredible pace for the last month and a half and pretty much single-handedly brought Washington to the playoffs. As far as playoff performance, not so great, but that's what the Conn Smythe Trophy is for. This is completely, the heart is for the regular season. So right now, I got to think that Ovechkin is a bit of the favorite for this.
For this one, this is a good one too. I mean, obviously you mentioned the way Ovi had picked up towards the end and literally single-handedly brought his team from out of the playoffs, second in the division, to winning the division and getting the third place seed. So Ovi obviously valuable to his team. I would think so for sure. Tavares is another one actually, as you mentioned, maybe getting snubbed from maybe kind of being surprised in there, but obviously as MVP to his team, Tavares is got to be one of the MVP to his team other than anyone else in any other team in the league. Just the way
he's
that
not there, then the others are not.
They're not an 8 seed. They're not even in the playoffs, right? They could be, I don't want to say dead last, but they could be,
they're not
dead
a playoff
last.
team without Tavares.
No, so I mean, with him, the way he moved up, obviously he had less points, less goals, less assists than Ovi. So I mean, in that sense, he's a little bit lower down by the end of the season. But Tavares was consistent throughout the whole year. He didn't, have anything like that. So, this is kind of a tough one, just based on the three guys. Maybe I'll go with Tavares on this one, just on the fact alone that it's tough when the team only is an 8 seed. But I would take Tavares on that just because MVP to his team. I don't know if there's anyone else maybe right now at this point of the league. Then I guess we'll get into the Masterson. We got Crosby, Harding, and McQuaid. So this one, as you were kind of talking to me a little bit before, maybe explain a little bit about this one.
Dedication and perseverance to the sport. So guys that have kind of had to go through battles and to keep coming back and show some perseverance to the game. So Crosby again is a nominee after he's gone through concussion issues, broken jaw this year. Adam McQuaid, another guy, had some injury issues and some problems, and Josh Harding, who battled some
goaltender
illnesses,
in Minnesota,
the goaltender from Minnesota, who it was a surprise start for Minnesota in the playoffs, and played pretty well until his injuries started kind of getting to him. So I don't know. I want to go with Harding kind of, but the fact that he wasn't really the starter all year. Backstrom was the guy for most of the year.
He wouldn't have played if he
in Minnesota.
Wouldn't have played in the playoffs,
his
right?
playoff performance was admirable. To come in not expecting to see a minute of ice time in a playoff series against a team like Chicago, and he came in and he put himself out there, played really well in the first game, held his team in there, got them a win in the series. So you got to give him a look. The league loves Crosby though, so I'm going to say that Crosby gets it just for the fact that he's Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, I think so. I think Crosby obviously, as you mentioned, but I like Harding in this one just because he actually has a disease, and I like the way he did battle back, I guess. I mean, he, as you mentioned, played phenomenal in the playoffs and things like that. But I mean, I don't know. This is a tough one. I don't know. It's really tough to pick. But maybe I'll go with Harding on this one.
Okay.
I guess now leading into the Calder, we got which is Rookie of the Year. Who do we got in this one? We got Gallagher, Huberdeau,
Brandon Saad.
Those are the three nominees.
So two Brandons and the Jonathan.
So, this one I actually like. Oh, this is another tough one. Maybe Huberdeau in this one. I mean, I think he led all rookies in points. Did he not?
I believe so.
Or was that Saad?
It might have even been Corey Conacher who could have got snubbed. I haven't looked at the rookie scoring.
I haven't looked at it too
was
much.
up there for the majority of the year. But
this one could almost go back to the heart. I mean, it's another MVP to your team kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at Gallagher and the way that Montreal did get themselves to a 2 seed. Obviously, he was a huge part of that team. He's not, he's not the Crosby on that team, but he's a huge part of that team. Huberdeau is obviously, basically the whole offense in Florida. I mean, he's basically everything. And Saad, I mean, Chicago's just too deep of a team, so it's tough to pick to get him in there. But I don't know. I kind of like Huberdeau in this one just on the fact that, I mean, his team didn't make the playoffs, whereas the other two guys did. But as an MVP to his team, I guess it would more be Huberdeau for me.
Yeah, I think I would have to pretty much agree with you on that. Huberdeau, as you said, he's pretty much the guy who was counted on, relied on pretty heavily in Florida. And, he's going to be their guy going forward. It's hard to argue whether or not Brandon Saad is going to be the guy on a team like Chicago. Admirable year, but there's a lot of guys you could put playing next to, Jonathan Taves and Marian Hossa that are going to have a good year and put up points. I mean, he fit in well. He didn't look out of place, but again, you're putting him next to two of the, top offensive talents in the Western Conference, if not the NHL. So you can't discount his performance. Played well. Gallagher, again, like you said, very important. Stepped up, played a good role as a rookie. Wasn't drafted last year, not a brand new rookie. I think he spent a couple of years playing an extra year in the Dub and maybe bid a little bit for the Hamilton Bulldogs, if I'm not mistaken. But Huberdeau came into this year. A lot was on his shoulders. He was kind of the guy that was expected to, and I would say he lived up to expectations.
Yeah, I guess with this Calder, I mean, obviously Kadri wasn't put in because he's not a rookie anymore, I believe, right? He played.
He's been up and down and
he's been up and down, but I mean, obviously as a guy who played his first full season, I like the way he was in this one. I guess
had this been his rookie season, I think he would have been the runaway favorite.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
I don't think he was eligible just because he has had enough games played.
Yeah.
So, what are we moving into? You want to do the Norris now?
The Norris,
best defenseman.
Top defenseman.
Really weird, now that we've got. It's kind of almost a changing of the guard, I would say, in the defenseman. You're so used to seeing guys like Lidstrom up there, always Chara always up there. You had like guys like Niedermeyer always up there, Rob Blake. The old guard is kind of changing over, so now you got the younger guys like Chris Letang, PK Subban, Ryan Suter. Suter, arguably the only true defenseman in that group. Subban and Letang, you'd make an argument that they're more offensive-minded defensemen. So I've always had a hard time kind of discerning what makes a Norris winner, whether or not it's your defensive capability or your point production. Defensemen are kind of paid to keep goals out, not score goals, but you can't argue with a defenseman who can put up points. So I'm going to go against the guys who had the points. I'm going to go with Suter just because he was that number one shutdown guy and was so important to Minnesota.
Okay, and this one, actually, I'll go with Letang on this one just on the fact that, I mean, he did have his points, but he's also one of those guys that can play any type of a role. I like seeing Letang. I mean, obviously, he's their staple on the point, on the power play with 4 forwards in that high-powered offensive team. So you see Pittsburgh up there with Letang anchoring that power play, but also he's one of those guys that can play a shutdown role. He can play a defensive role. He can throw the odd body check. I mean, and he
not quite as physical as like
he plays some penalty kill, right?
Or a Suter, but he does.
And he plays some penalty kill. I mean, he does some boxing and that kind of thing in their own zone. So maybe I'll just go with Letang on that one, just based alone on that, I guess. And also he did have his points as you look at, Carlson won it last year on his point production, basically. I mean, he was a runaway. I think he was in the top 10 in points in the whole league. So I mean, he basically won that one easy. Jack Adams.
Coach Award, you want to give me the nominees?
Okay, we got McLean over in Ottawa. We got Hitchcock in St. Louis, and we have John Tortorella for the Rangers. So this is another one where you look at a team who was maybe a lower team last year who moved up to a higher seed this year.
A lot of it is, it's always that kind of way. I mean, any coach can kind of, if you're always in first place, it's hard to, you can't really improve on first place, and keeping consistency is obviously important as a coach, but a lot of it I think is looked at as what have you done, how have you molded and changed, and kind of how have you given this team your identity, have you put your stamp on them.
So
I think McLean has got to be the runaway favorite, just for the fact that he worked with a team that was so injured for most of the year. He was playing with mostly an AHL team, losing Carlson, losing Spezza, their 2 best players, and he got the most out of that group. He got them into the playoffs, got them in as a 7th seed, and won a playoff series, so it's hard to go against McLean.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing, actually. Hitchcock was kind of there with St. Louis last year. They made it to the second round of the playoffs. So Hitchcock, I mean, they kind of balanced out, maybe even a little bit lower, losing the first round.
They were pretty similar, though.
Well,
the way McLean had changed much from last year.
The way McLean had, resurrected that team and then dominating Montreal in the first round so far. I think McLean's got to be a runaway at this point. Tortorella, the Rangers, they're still kind of there, but
I'm really against that just because the Rangers,
they were so good last year.
The Rangers were a number 1 seed last year, were they not? And then
now they're down.
Tortorella comes in and brings them as a 6th seed. I mean, how do you do worse at your job and still be considered one of the best? I mean, I feel like bias maybe. Randy Carlyle could have got a nod. Michel Therrien in Montreal could have got a nod. Brought a team from 15th place to second place. I don't know how he gets snubbed in that candidacy. I don't know. Tortorella might have given someone a death stare or swore at someone and said, nominate me or I'm going to bust your balls or something like that. I don't know. But if he wins, that's a travesty. I think McLean has got to be the runaway favorite.
It's tough.
For it.
So then
that group, at least.
We'll run out of time quickly, but maybe we'll throw the Vezina at you here. We got Bobrovsky over in Bobrovsky in Columbus, and Niemi, and then Lundqvist. Niemi in San Jose, and Lundqvist in the Rangers. So take her away.
Oh, it's so Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky
didn't make the playoffs.
Bobrovsky was,
he was the best
statistically,
goaltender.
I think was the best of the 3, but it's just so hard if you don't get your team to look at the team he's got playing in front of him. Really, not that special, and he was arguably the reason that they were even as high as 9th. And were sitting at an 8th seed for a little bit. I want to go with playoff success here, and I think if Lundqvist gets his team to the semifinals and gets them past Boston, he gets it. Unfortunately, playoffs do kind of come into.
I know it's supposed to be on regular season, but the playoffs do come into mindset with this.
And I think I'm going to go with Niemi. I think Niemi gets it.
I was probably going to take Niemi too. Another one maybe I'll throw at you is Craig Anderson. Just based on,
a little bit of injury,
he missed a few games.
He's so valuable to Ottawa.
But he had the top. I think he had top save percentage and goals against average. So he was there, and Ottawa's been such a good defensive team. So maybe I would take, I'd throw him maybe into the talk. Mm-hmm. I'll take Niemi on this one too, just based on the season he had. He played like 42 games or something out of 48 or something like that. So
Thomas
he played a phenomenal amount of
games. Just a bookmark on the bench.
But yeah, so I guess we'll come back. We got some picks and things like that here in the next little while. We'll run down our picks from round 1 as well as going into round 2. So you're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Hello and welcome back to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan, and we've gone through picks throughout the year, and we even did them in the first round, so maybe I'll throw them at you here quick. I mean, they're pretty even.
Yeah, shocking. You finished one pick ahead of me regular season, and this first round playoffs, both of us 8 points.
Dead even,
both of us picked, I think, 6 series right, and 2 times
to the right series you picked the right amount of
games.
games.
So 8 points each. We're at a dead even split here. So what we're going to do for the second round, we'll do it again. We'll pick series and games, each worth 2 points, so there is another 16
We'll double it, so it's the same amount of points.
2 points for picking the team, because it is a little tougher. The matchups are a little bit tougher in the second round, and then 2 points again for the number of games. So we'll start out west with original 6 series. I like how we've got a side note, 2 original 6 series this round as well. So
yeah, that's right.
That's nice to see.
We were looking for those in the first round.
Yeah, so that's nice to see. So Toronto and Boston was an original 6.
Yeah, you're right.
But we get 2 in the second round, so that's good. It's always good competition in those series. So start west, we'll go with Chicago, Detroit.
Chicago and Detroit. Look at the way Detroit rolled over Anaheim in that. Well, I should say rolled over, but the way they picked it up there in that 7th game there and did get the series done. But I got to go with Chicago in this with just the fact alone. I mean, look at the regular season and the way they, took care of the Wild in the first round. I just like Chicago too much. I think. They're playing good defensively. Crawford's kind of stood on his head a little bit. He's made some good saves.
Mm-hmm. He's played a lot better than he did in the late going in the season.
And actually Hossa. I mean, Hossa was kind of a guy who stepped up, and even Sharp. I mean, Sharp's one of the goal scorers on that team, and he did have a bunch of goals in that first round series. So I like the way Chicago's playing. I mean, Detroit's going to be there throughout the series. They could win a couple of games. I'm going to say 6. I think I'm going to take Chicago in 6. I think Detroit can steal a couple, especially at home, maybe game 3 or 4 or something like
Joe
that.
Louis is in playoff time.
Joe Louis
never
is
easy
tough,
to play.
so I can see Detroit winning a couple. Maybe not games in Chicago, but they might win a couple at home.
Okay, I'm going to go Chicago as well. I think 7, just because it'll be Chicago getting it done at home ice in game 7. Again, I like what you said. I'm on the fence just because I haven't seen enough from Taves yet. The captain hasn't really stepped up, and it's going to take him to really step up for him to start getting past these teams. I mean, at this point, you're playing a team that's kind of battle-tested. Detroit, came through a tough series against a pretty big physical team in Anaheim, and now they're going to be up against a skating team, so they're going to have to alter their game a little bit. But Detroit does adapt well, so I think they're going to push them right to the brink, and this will be kind of the series that defines what Chicago really does. If they win this one, if it's a long, tough series, then you got to like them to go all the way. If not, toss-up. But I think Chicago, 7 games. Stick with the West again. We'll go L.A., San Jose, all-California series.
Okay, so this one, as you mentioned, all-California series, so we get all late games. They start tonight as well, I believe at 9 o'clock, but...
Central Standard Time.
Central, Manitoba time. I like LA in this one. I mean, I think we might split on this one, but I'm going to take LA in this one. I picked LA at the beginning of the playoffs as well as the beginning of the regular season, so I like the way they bounce back from St. Louis. They're showing some adversity early on. The way they bounce back, I mean, obviously San Jose is a phenomenal team. The way they dominated Vancouver in all 4 games. Couture's played amazing for the Sharks. Pavelski too. Even Pavelski always steps up in the
always
playoffs.
A good playoff
kind of like a Johan Franzen.
Thornton's been a lot better. I think he's one of the leaders,
well.
and usually he's been kind of ridiculed for his lack of playoff performance.
Even Marleau too, kind of, but he's been there.
And you got to like Niemi going against.
Niemi, and then even Boyle. I like Boyle on the point. Boyle picked up a ton of his points. But no, I like the way I like defensively. I'm going to take LA in this one, and that's why I'm going to take LA is because of defensively. I think obviously the Sharks can play a shutdown, but I like Doughty back there. I like Scuderi and Voinov as well to maybe shut down and Quick. I mean, Quick's Jonathan Quick. I mean, he's always been there. They don't score a whole lot of goals. Definitely offensive edge goes to San Jose, I think, in this one. But I'm going to take LA just on defensive alone and the way they've bounced back. They have won 4 straight as well. So and maybe less rest too. 6 games instead of 4. Got a little bit of rest, but that's another argument you could throw San Jose with rest.
Did you say a number of games yet?
Let's take 7.
Okay. So you think the home ice is going to play a
I think
factor?
the home ice
might. They'll get it done in 7. Okay, I'll get a little bit shorter and sweeter. San Jose in 6. I think they get it done on home ice because they'll be playing Game 6 on home ice. You could argue that they both swept. LA came out and lost the first 2 and then went 4 straight. San Jose won 4 straight.
It was a bad gaff by Quick.
LA, I'm a little bit just a lot of what I think LA did and why they won their first series. We didn't really get a chance to talk about it earlier, but I think what LA did was you saw that series had what? It was like 700 and something hits total in the series. And LA, I think, just kind of wore St. Louis out after those first 2 games, and they just kept beating on them, and eventually St. Louis kind of folded up, and they couldn't take the physical game that LA was bringing to them. And I think San Jose is a lot bigger, stronger, more physical team, and they're not going to lay down, and they're well rested, as you had mentioned. And I don't think the physical game is going to wear them out. If anything, I think San Jose might turn it around and put more physical play to LA, and maybe wear them down a little bit after LA came off, a little bit of a weaker. I don't want to call St. Louis soft, but they're not big and physical the way that St. Louis is. So I'm going to have to go with San Jose in 6 in that one.
Okay. All right, and then we'll move over to the East.
We'll go to the East. So we got game going tonight. We'll start with that one. We got Pittsburgh. A little bit shaky at times with Fleury kind of blowing it against New York, and then Ottawa rolling over Montreal.
Well, I think this one, I don't want to say it's an easy pick, but if Pittsburgh can get some goaltending, some defense, I don't see Pittsburgh not beating Ottawa. I love the way Ottawa, dominated Montreal in their series, beating them in 5 games. They scored a ton of goals. So, as far as that goes, Ottawa scoring lots of goals and Pittsburgh giving up a lot of goals. That kind of favors Ottawa in that sense. But offensively, I like Pittsburgh just a little bit more, obviously a lot more. And the way Crosby and Malkin, Neal's back full. Now he missed a couple of games in round 1, so Neal's back. Iginla stepped it up too, and even Brandon Morrow. So I like Pittsburgh maybe just a little bit more than Ottawa. Ottawa's got Carlson back there now full time. Who knows? Spets could come back for like game 6 or 7 or something like that. He's been skating.
Well, if it even goes that long, right?
I like Pittsburgh in this, and before Spets gets back, I like Pittsburgh in 5. I think Ottawa might steal one. Actually, I think they might even steal it on the road. I think they could beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, but they'll lose a couple of home games, so I'm going to take Pittsburgh in 5.
Okay, I think we're going to be even on this one because I'm going Pittsburgh in 5 as well. We shared a couple of picks last round as well. But, as I said, Pittsburgh, I think they kind of got out of their system. They had a couple of shaky games, and, you could argue that Fleury blew their, game 4, I think, that he really
like
fell
7
apart.
goals or something.
And Pittsburgh, they're just too deep and too talented. They have 3 lines that they can throw out there. They just keep coming at you in waves, and they haven't shown any signs of slowing up on offense. They've been able to pour the puck in the net almost at will. You got to kind of like Craig Anderson. He has been solid, but I think he's going to be facing 45, maybe 50 shots a night with the way that Pittsburgh's offense can get going. And if you get special teams, if Ottawa starts getting into any kind of penalty trouble, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. So I think Pittsburgh, might drop one. Anderson might steal the one, but I think Pittsburgh kind of rolls through them. Boston Rangers. I think this is the most interesting series of the first round. Yeah, maybe them and maybe St. Louis, LA and San Jose. But I think this series is kind of the one to watch. This will be interesting. Yeah,
this will be a great series. Obviously, both of them finished up last night, so they're going to be coming off short rest. I believe they don't play till Thursday, so they still get the 2 days in between. But this one, they're the last 2 teams to finish up. They both showed problems in round 1, and they both showed the ability to score, and they both showed character in their series as well, with the way Boston came back and the way that the Rangers came back too. They were down 3-2, but this is a really tough one actually. I'm gonna go with Boston in this one just because I don't know. I got to go with Boston in this one just because they did bounce back from Toronto. They really slipped their way into the playoffs. They came in on a down note, and they only beat Toronto in 7. But I think Boston in this one maybe. I think. Going on a limb and maybe they shape up here a little bit. And the Rangers, they haven't really been able to score a whole lot, as we had kind of mentioned before.
Well, 5-0 against Washington.
5-0. They found it now, but we'll see. I kind of think Washington kind of rolled over in that game towards the end. But, I like Boston this one. I'm going to think a drawn-out series. I think 6. I think home ice could play a factor in this one. I think Boston will get it done in the Garden in 6, though. Yeah,
well, you mentioned home ice. That's why I'm kind of going to go with the Rangers. Boston does have home ice advantage, but they dropped a game to Toronto in Boston, and they almost lost a series clincher in Boston as well. They haven't been exactly overpowering or overly impressive on home ice. The Rangers haven't lost a game at home yet in the playoffs. They've won all 3 of their home ice games, and the last 2 games, Lundqvist has been absolute lights out, coming off back-to-back shutouts, and he's one of those guys that if he gets hot at the right time, there's almost no way to beat New York, because you saw it even Boston kind of getting frustrated against Toronto with their inability to beat Reimer, and Reimer kind of fell apart a little bit late, kind of a little bit shaky. Lundqvist isn't the guy that's going to do that, and I think I think that in the end, Lundqvist is going to be the determining factor in this. That if he stays hot, And, New York showed that they can kind of fill the net. They're not going to back down for Boston. They've got some talent. They've got some speed. And you saw Boston looking kind of tired at the end of that long 7-game series. They've got some older guys. They got Char, who's, I think, 36 out there. And he can't play playing 30 minutes a night every night because he's too old to do it anymore. They got Yager, who looks older and slower every shift. Wade Redden is out with injuries. I think it's more so just fatigue because they've got some the young guys up forward. Sagan was really disappointing in round 1, so if he doesn't step it up, Boston's going to be in a lot of trouble if they're trying to line match with a team like New York. So I'm going to go with New York, but long series, I think 7.
All right, so that pretty much wraps up picks. We went dead even in round 1, and we're splitting on this one. We split 2 series. Games are split as well, so I mean, we should get a different result in this one. We'll see as we'll see more moves forward. I guess we'll be back at the end of the second round, though. But I guess for Jaret Schneider and Matt Durnan, and thanks for watching.